Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Investor Financing Podcast. We have a great show. We're going to talk about how to invest part-time and make a boatload of money by just doing simple investing strategies and grow your net worth from $10,000 or starting with $10,000 of investment capital to well over $5 million by just doing part-time investing, keeping it simple. And, over time, even with uncertainties in the market, we know over time real estate has historically always gone up in value. So if you can weather storms, you can grow your net worth significantly. And that could be as simple as buying a primary residence, taking some of that equity and buying multiple properties with that, right? So I always tell people you don't have to overcomplicate things in real estate investing. You got to keep it almost simple. And whether that's a strategy of what we talk about now as house hacking, where you buy a duplex with FHA financing and live in one of the units and rent the other one out. There's so many strategies that don't take that much rocket science to figure out how to do. It's just really getting in the game and going, okay, I'm paying, if you're living in the Bay Area, for example, I talked to this lady in San Jose, she's renting a one bedroom for like $3,500 a month. I go, well, and she wants to invest. I'm like, well, why not just start with the basics and just buy a duplex or triplex in the Bay Area, live in one, live rent free, possibly make $1,000 or $2,000 and appreciate in cash flow, and then your net difference is like $5,000 a month. Take that $5,000, save it for down payments as you gain equity in that house, refinance it. So we're going to talk about simple strategies where you can spend 5 to 10 hours per month and not be stressed out. That's a big thing too. It's real estate gets people really stressed, right? Like if you're in this business and there's these transaction junkies out there and that's all they want to do is deals, but you can get rich a little slower without stress, which is I think for me is a lot more appealing because I don't want to be stressed. Okay. Life's too short to be stressed out all the time. So anyways, our guest, Moneeka Sawyer, she's a TEDx speaker. She's been on stages with Suzanne Summers, Martha Stewart, Ice-T, and Coco. That's pretty cool. And she's a California native. I don't know a native, but she's been living in California for a long time. And I'm curious to kind of dive in and learn a little bit more about blissful real estate investing, what that means to you. I'm also curious about your podcast. So we got a lot to dive into. Welcome to the show.
Hello there, Beau. Thank you for having me. I feel like you just said everything I want to say. Maybe we're done.
You know what I noticed? I noticed everybody starts their podcast and asks about the person's background. It's like, let me just give their background in 2 minutes because then we don't waste time. We can get in the meat and potatoes.
Yes.
And so I kind of want to dive into when you started your journey here. Like, did you ever have a real job or were you just investing or do you still have a job or what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So no, I actually have a college degree from UC Berkeley. I got a business degree and went into corporate immediately. My dad was in real estate, and so he actually came to this country with $200 in his pocket from India and started investing in real estate as fast as he could because he heard, even in India, that the golden ticket to wealth in the United States is real estate. And this is something I really want everybody to hear. Like, even immigrants in other countries understand that in the United States, we have an opportunity and a right that people don't have in other parts of the world. And that is to own our own home and to even own several and be landlords, right? And the government supports us and encourages that, right? So my dad comes over here, starts building a real estate empire, puts me through college, all of that stuff. But I had also seen my dad go through all the stress of real estate. So anybody who's listening, right, Beau, you were just saying, people think it's really stressful, right? So he did get the people that wouldn't pay. So he had mortgage problems. They would call him for toilets and termites, right? So he had all of those problems. And so by the time I graduated from college, I was like, no, thank you. The money ain't worth it. And how many people are listening to us right now thinking, yeah, it just feels like it's not worth it. Like it's too much work, right? So one night my dad said to me, so I graduated from college. It was during a recession and I couldn't get a job. And so I was really stressed out. And I remember my dad telling me one night, this night changed my life over the dinner table. He said, Moneeka, everybody has fear, everybody has stress, and everybody has money problems. Do you want poor people money problems or do you want rich people money problems? And so I decided in that moment we were going to do rich people money problems if there had to be problems. And so I decided to invest in real estate. And so I eventually got a corporate job. I got paid very, very little because we were in a recession, but I saved I saved as much as I could from my tiny little income. Then I got engaged, and for our wedding, we asked for our wedding gifts to be help with the down payment for our home. So we just got money, and we got $13,000, and we put $10,000 down on our primary residence. So that's how I got started. But I was in corporate. We bought our primary residence, and then just like you were saying, we used the equity in that. After about 4 years, it had grown enough. We could use that equity to buy our next primary residence, rented this one out. And then the story goes on, and I'll go on to that in a little bit. But basically, I was in corporate and just started really, really slow with the most intuitive way that we could get started. Like you say, why pay rent? Why pay somebody else's mortgage? Pay your own mortgage, right? Yeah, and make yourself rich. So
the couple nuggets there. One is I do a podcast, or I do a live show with an Indian gentleman every Friday. His name is Vinny Chopra. He's a Bay Area guy. And similar story to your father, he came from India with $7 in his pocket. And
seven, that's awesome.
I think that's embellished a little bit. Well, now Vinny has a portfolio of over $600 million, so it's pretty impressive. So I love doing a show with him. And it's interesting learning about the Indian culture, because if you're in the Bay Area, there's a big Indian population. And I think when you immigrate to this country, and if you've come from kind of like a country that there's not as many opportunities, right? You see a lot of people that immigrate here with nothing, and they just see the opportunity. And then you see the people that are born here in the States, and they take things for granted. And it's like, guys, listen, like this is why people want to come to this country. It seems like everybody's bad mouthing, whoever's in the president at the time. Like, put that aside, guys. We live in the best country, one of the best countries in the world, and there's so much opportunity. So it's kind of really weighing at me, like when I see all these negativity out there, I'm starting to like want to turn off social media, because at the end of the day, it's what you make of it. And like yourself, you started out from very humble beginnings. Luckily you had your father where you had a little bit of mentorship, but you realized that, like, hey, let's just start with the primary residence instead of paying rent. Let's do this. We know over time whether, it might take, over the last couple of years, real estate's gone up 20 and 30% a year, which is stupid. Okay. We all know it's stupid. It's just, and we're probably going to be in a stagnant market for a while. Maybe we're seeing some price declines. So you just kind of went from one house to another house. And then at some point you had a tremendous amount of equity in a property. And then you did a large HELOC and you went out shopping and bought like 9 or 10 properties.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to go back also and just mention, I personally have traveled to over 60 countries. And I'm not that person that goes and stays in 5-star hotels. I'm on the buses. I'm at the laundromat doing laundry. I'm in the local dive. So I'm meeting the people and I'm talking to them and I'm having conversations. I'm getting my hair done, talking at the salon. All us ladies know how that goes, right? And the thing is, I know there's a lot of trouble here in the United States, right? I have my own frustrations. But it's really important, Beau, I just love what you just said. It's so important for us to focus on what's right and what's good. Because if you look all over the world, I consider myself a citizen of the world, but really the United States is such an amazing place. We have so much opportunity here that people can't even fathom elsewhere in the world. I'll say things as a matter of course, and they're like, what are you talking about? Very simple things, like drinking water out of a tap. You know what I mean? Like simple things, right? So just know that our opportunity here is so much greater than anybody else in the world. And if you're not taking advantage of that, you're letting yourself down, right? Because we we can just take it for granted and not see it for what it is. And so really focus on what's working and what's right, rather than, like you say, all the social media and all the news and all the politics and all of those things that can feel frustrating. Don't not pay attention. I mean, we all need to vote. We all need to still pay attention in our own communities, but also for yourself, focus on what's right here in this country, because it's amazing. It really is. So anyway, so yes, so that was the thing. And then the other thing I wanted to focus on, Beau, is you are a lender. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you talk about house hacking with getting a duplex or a triplex or a quad, right? Understand that when you do that, or you buy your primary residence, it's not just that you're not paying someone else's mortgage and you're paying your own, right? It's not just that. Getting into your primary residence property is super, super easy. It's the easiest out of anything else. And Beau can attest to this. You can have lower percentages down for your down payment. Your rates are lower. Your terms are better. It's easier to qualify. Your ratios are higher, all of those things. So it's so much easier to start with your primary, whether you're house hacking, whether you buy a primary residence. You know, when we bought our primary residence, we couldn't afford it. So we did what's now called house hacking, but now in those days it was called getting a roommate. We got a roommate, because we couldn't afford the mortgage. Whatever it takes so that you're not paying down someone else's mortgage, you do that, right?
I love it.
Yeah. And so then, so we bought our second primary residence. It was gorgeous. We rented out the first one, and then the other one grew. Again, it was another 4 or 5 years. It was in the Bay Area, so our appreciation is nice. 4 or 5 years, I got a huge equity line, and then 2008 hit. 2009, I went shopping and bought a bunch of houses. And I've sold some of those to buy other stuff, but whatever, that's kind of how I got started and got rolling. And over time, so I bought at the top of the market in 2001. I bought at the top of the market in 2008. In 2001, all of our property values dropped about 20%, 30%. 2008, I lost 50% of the value of all of my properties in 3 months. So no matter what the cycles are doing, if you buy, the location is important. Wouldn't you agree, Beau?
Mm-hmm.
Not every market has recovered or goes up, but if you buy in the right location, your properties will recover over time. So real estate really is the long game. You want to make sure, and that's one of those things when I talk about bliss, is you want to make sure that you give yourself time to be right. Can I define what I mean by bliss? Would you mind if I did that?
Yes,
okay.
Please do.
So bliss is the deep sense of joy and contentment and confidence that you can handle anything that comes your way. So it's all about emotional mastery and emotional resilience. So why is this relevant in real estate? Warren Buffett says, if you cannot control your emotions, you cannot control your money. But that's definitely true in real estate. If you're out there in real estate for the adrenaline, you're going to make a mistake. But if you understand that it's the long game, you run it as a business, manage your emotions, and understand what stresses you out and what doesn't, and you run the business based on that, you're going to have a much more blissful experience in building that business, and staying in the long term is going to be easier for you. Right?
I love that. Yeah. I love that. The lending business, I just deal specifically with investors and business owners. I don't do residential, owner occupied type of loans, although I used to when I was younger. But my business is very stressful. And then I buy rental properties. I used to flip a lot in the Bay Area when I lived in the Bay Area. And recently I actually I interviewed one of my friends, Derek, and after the show, I said, Derek, I'm thinking about finding a business coach, a performance coach. I said, I just there's a missing element, with me, because I wasn't blissful. Right. And I realized that, and it's important to be blissful, because you make better moves when you're blissful. I'm always stressed because I got people, right now I got a huge pipeline of loans and people need it done now. We got rates that are locks that are expiring, and everybody's taking forever to do things. It's very stressful. And learning how to be blissful, I think, is the number one thing anybody can do. So I love that word. I've never used it before. But now I'm going to be talking about being blissful, because it's so true. It's just so important that if you look at, a lot of people don't look at their primary residence as a business. And even some naysayers like Grant Cardone, for example. He says, "Oh, don't buy a primary residence." I think he's foolish. I mean, obviously he's a smart dude and can raise millions and millions of dollars. He's a different breed. The average person, though, creates their wealth through owning their own primary residence, and over time, that's where most people's wealth is. So I don't know how people like that say that, but that's fine. They can have their own opinions. He's obviously successful in his own right, but I do believe that the fastest way, the easiest way to wealth creation is to be strategic on the purchases that you make, because instead of paying rent, you're paying down a mortgage, you're building appreciation, you're getting tax write-offs, you're using the debt equity as you build it to put into new opportunities. Mm-hmm. So I just think it's like, just be strategic with those plans. Like you can, like this house I bought here in Las Vegas has gone up a couple $100,000 in a short, couple of years. I could sell it, right? I'm married, so I could take a $500,000 exemption. I don't have that much equity in it, but you have up to $500,000 on primary, or I could keep it and put a HELOC on it before I move out and use that money for a down payment. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is to try not to sell. I've bought and sold so many houses, and I think selling, you want to sell less. You do need to sell sometimes, mm-hmm. But I do think if I look back when I bought my first house, I bought it on a lease option. I leased it for a year, and I said, okay, I set the price. I'll buy this townhouse in San Ramon, California. My exercise price was $325. And then back then they had a loan program where you could use new appraised value when you exercise. So I leased it for a year, got roommates to live in the room. So I house hacked before it was house hacking too. And then when I went to buy it, it appraised at $375. And I just made $50,000. And when you're 20 something, that's a lot of money. I closed on it, bought and lived in it for a few more years, ended up moving to Lake Tahoe, but that's a different story. Ended up selling the house to my brother, which I kicked myself because that same house that I bought for $325 today, it's worth $1,250,000. So yes, if I would have kept just that property and kept a tenant in, and even if I want to get your thoughts, are you here's the next question I want to roll into. Are you just doing traditional rentals long term? Are you doing any furnished rentals? But because I was just thinking, even if you're a little bit short on, you had some negative cash flow. Now, with all the opportunities such as corporate furnished rentals, where you do 30 plus days, you could do short-term rental in some markets, depending on the legalities of that market, or you could do co-living spaces. A lot of my friends are doing co-living where they're buying houses and they're putting an extra bedroom in, and they're renting out by their bedroom. They put management in place. There's actually third-party management that does it. So there's all these ways that even if it's not a strong cash flow, that you can create it to be a strong cash flow. So you really don't need as many doors as, like, I went out and started buying properties in Indiana, and I look at it now, I'm like, well, it's really like, for that, I'm not there. They're 3,000 miles away. Sure, there's great cash flow, but when you're buying older housing stock, you're going to have serious problems there. So let's dive into, like, are you just buying and just making it really simple, just putting long-term tenants in? What's your process there?
Yeah. So like you say, there are a million, I always say there's a million ways to make $1 million in real estate. And really the way that you can use your homes is so varied. And there's so much information out there on how to do these things. I will say for me, I consider myself a smart person, but I was not passionate about real estate. And so up until more recently. And so for me, it was really about finding the simplest, easiest way to take advantage of this opportunity here in this country, right? And so for me, it wasn't all about like, how cool could it be, how much money I could make. And this is another thing that people need to consider. Do you need the cash flow, or are you okay with going with just appreciation? So in California, or at least in the Bay Area, every single house that we bought, and I know that this is a bad word, but we had negative cash flow, right? We carried a negative because houses in the Bay Area usually will not start to make any kind of cash flow for the first 2 to 5 years. So we would regularly buy something and put renters in and then carry a negative. Now you can get around that because you can do a lot of the short term, like you were saying, the corporate, the short term, Airbnb, that sort of thing, right? Or you can house hack with a multiple unit, right? For me, whenever we had trouble, I would either get a roommate, or in 2008, when we bought at the top of the market and lost all this money, we didn't lose. That's the other thing to keep in mind. You don't lose till you sell. It was just paper losses. Really keep that in mind. I love what Beau said earlier on, that as long as you can ride the cycles, which means don't sell when it's down, don't freak out. You need to be able to hold on to those. We ended up Airbnb in a couple of our properties. And that really up leveled our cash flow. Our mortgage, we ended up not having to pay a mortgage because we just Airbnb a bedroom and a bathroom in our primary residence to survive there. And then we Airbnb'd one of our other properties. So that's as much as I've done with the short term. Again, for me, it's kind of keep it simple, sweetheart, that sort of thing. Like, I don't want to have too many doors. I don't want to have things so far away. I don't know what's going on. The more doors that you have, the more opportunities there are for stress. However, the less doors you have when you have a vacancy, you're losing more money. So you want to make sure that you have those less doors in better neighborhoods so that they rent out fast, right? So it's always a balancing act on what is it that you need and what is your commitment to the business. I wasn't super committed. I was just kind of like, I just want to take advantage of this. I know it's a good thing, but I'm over here doing marketing because that's the fun thing that I love to do. Right. So really paying attention to those sorts of things will help you to decide, do you want a lot of doors? Do you want a few doors? Where do you want those doors? What kind of tenants do you want? Do you want to do Airbnb, have it managed by yourself or by somebody else? Or do there's so many different opportunities, but you want to take a look at sort of what's your tolerance for putting time into the business. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, yeah, it does. That's great. And I think just this conversation, really I think the big takeaways of this conversation is even if you're not passionate about real estate, and even if it's just
millions.
Yeah. And you could quit your job eventually, right? Mm-hmm. Or, do something you would rather do with your time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where I see the world changing now. I think people are realizing, like, listen, there's these side hustles. There's these side hustles then can replace your W-2 job. So we're having a real big hiring problem in the United States because I think more and more people are trying, at least. Now, I think there'll be a good percentage that fail and go back to the corporate world because that's just the way the 80-20 rule, right? 80% are going to go back to work, 20% are going to kick butt and never go back to a W-2 job. And so do you work in corporate anymore, or are you, so what does your day look like? I know you have a coaching program. You specialize in working with women and helping them become blissful investors. Talk to me about your coaching program. Talk to me a little bit about your podcast as well.
Yeah. So my podcast is called Real Estate Investing for Women, and it's focusing on women. It's once a week. It's about 45 minutes. Have great conversations like this one, Beau. So it's really, really fun. And it's really focused on women. And people will say, well, what's different about women versus men investing? Women look at things differently. We feel things differently. We have different things that we bring to the game that are really sort of our superpowers, right? So we, as women, we have kind of a different conversation. Doesn't mean that guys don't listen in. I will say probably about 25% of my listeners are guys because there's such good strategies too. But my focus is on women. My coaching program is full right now, so I'm not actually bringing any other people on. And part of that is about designing my blissful life. So I was only in corporate for about 10 years. My real estate, even though I had to carry negative cash flow and I went kind of more slowly, right? Every 4 years I'd buy something type of thing. It basically made me job optional in about 15 years. Me and my husband. My husband, he's a computer programmer. He wants to work. That's the passion of his life, but I didn't. So about 10 years, I was able to quit and just kind of go full-time as a coach. At the time, I became a bliss mentor. That was what my coaching was. So I used to coach big executives in Silicon Valley for companies that we all know still, but I can't name. But I used to coach these guys. And what's so interesting about them is that they were these really powerful people, right? And most of them were men. I don't think I coached any women in those days. They were all really powerful. They had these amazing businesses, amazing marriages, amazing houses, amazing cars, right? Everything looked great, but they were miserable. A little bit like what you were talking about, Beau, not that you're miserable, but you're not blissful, right? So I would go in and teach them how to bring joy back into their life. And once they do that, their creativity went up, their businesses flourished, their relationships healed. I mean, it's not a magic pill, but lots of things change when you run your life with the attitude of, I want to be blissful, right? And you build your business that way too.
Yeah, I think that's the most powerful thing. And I think that I catch myself comparing I have a lot of very successful real estate friends. And sometimes I'm looking over my shoulder like, how are they so successful? And I'm like, why am I on this slower trajectory where I'm sure a lot of people look at me and go, wow, you're pretty successful. You know, good amount of doors. You do pretty well with your business. You know, you actually have two businesses. But what I'm realizing is, listen, I don't need to be a Vinny Chopra and own $600 million of real estate. He's passionate about it. He's almost 70. That's his blissfulness. For me, I'm more about like harmony and blissfulness, meaning like I want a slower pace of life. I don't want to feel like I have to keep up with the Joneses. I don't need the nicest car in town. I don't need to show off to anybody. I don't want to compare myself to anybody. And that's why I got a performance and business coach. And it's amazing. My coach that I got turned on to, he's like an 80-year-old guy or close to 80. If I can give any advice to anybody, go get yourself a mentor, go get yourself a coach, because everybody needs a coach. Michael Jordan's the world's need a coach. And I've only had 3 full sessions with my coach. And I feel like it's opening up so much in my mind, and we're working on, and it's just funny because it's like, it's really me just figuring out loud what I would need to do. You know, oh, I'm going to get a contract loan processor. I'm going to do this. I don't want to come to work feeling like I got to get things done. And that's not being blissful. So coaching is so important. And you're right. I think the really highly driven people, these men you're talking about, these really successful people, it's funny to see that here's a guy that's probably making several $1 million a year, you know, net worths of 10, $20 million plus, 30, 50, who knows? Those people aren't any happier than you are making $100,000 a year or $80,000 a year. You know, those people aren't happier. Sometimes they're in worse shape than you are mentally. So I think there needs to be a big push. There needs to be more coaches like yourself that help people understand that, listen, you don't need to rush out and go buy 100 doors your first year. You can do this over time and be content. And I think that's what I'm learning as I get older in life. I'm turning 45 this year, and I look back, I go, I wish I would have, you know, by 30, I thought I was going to be so much further ahead. And that's just foolishness, because it's all about the contentment we have and the joy internally. And so I'm learning that later in life. And so
I love that term that you used, Beau, content, because I think so many of us, we think that's, people almost see that word as a bad word. Like, if I'm content, then I won't continue to work hard. I won't continue to have ambition. No, content is, I'm happy with the path of my life. It doesn't mean that you don't have ambition. It means that you're content with who you are. And because you're content with who you are, you have the power to make your life what you need it and want it to be. Contentment isn't complacency. It's power. And understanding that you want to be content, that you want to have a good life, you want to have good relationships, you want to have time for hobbies, you want to, you know, those things, and you still want to be able to run an amazing business. You have to be content inside, because you have to know who you are. You have to know what's going to drive you, you know? And so, and it's not a have to, but I find that the people that are most blissful, that have the most joyful lives, including really amazing businesses, have this sense of joy and contentment. You know, it's true. I only currently have 10 doors. I could own so many. You guys know my net worth. I've got beautiful cash flow. I can retire my husband, who's an engineer, right? But I could do so much more. Why put in that extra time, energy, effort, stress, when that's not really what I need? I do need to make sure that my net worth will continue to grow, so that when I retire, I don't have to cut back, right? I'm going to want to live a bigger life. I'm going to want to have, and there's also inflation. I want to make sure I keep up with that, right? So real estate is really good for that, by the way. So I'm keeping that stuff in mind. I'm not just stopping, but I'm not out there trying to be the biggest, coolest person in the industry. I'm a podcaster. There are a lot of people out there that know a lot more than me and make a lot more than me and are really, really cool. Kind of like what you were saying, Beau, right? Like, they've got 2,000 doors in 1 year, right? I'm not that cool, but I'm wealthy and I'm happy. And I'm doing the things that are interesting to me. I'm able to make a difference in the world. I'm able to run a podcast, which is a passion project, right? My husband and I just did 3 vacations this year, one in Africa, one in Hawaii, and one in Costa Rica, right? We could do what we want to do, right? That's what this is really all about, is what is it for you? The only person you're competing with is yourself, not all those other people out there.
I love that. Yeah, it's important. It's important. I think this podcast really sets a tone of, because I think people out there, they want so much, but they don't know how to get. They don't know how to like start. And it really, just based on this conversation, it's not that hard to start. It's that first, buying that first primary residence. Maybe like we're in a kind of an uncertain market right now, which means houses are going to sit on the market more. Prices will probably drop a little bit. And people that were pushing themselves too hard and over leveraged will get hurt again because they don't have reserves, they don't have the bandwidth. But these times that come are good times for people to buy property, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in an up or down market, there's opportunities. And so what are your thoughts? I know we're coming up on our time here, but what are your thoughts about the current market? And do you think there's going to be some good opportunities over the next 12 or 24 months?
So someone is going to be right about what's going on with the market, but nobody has a crystal ball and we don't know who that person's going to be. So I try not to do predictions. What I will say is this: I've bought in up markets and I bought in down markets, and I'm always glad I did. Just make sure that you pay attention to the markets you're buying in, and make sure that you do have the reserves so that if things go bad, you can ride through any kind of storm. My feeling, honestly, about this is there's been a lot of hype about inflation. I don't know if anybody's noticing, though, that the inflation is not really hurting people. And I can't believe I just said that on the air, but there's so much money that got saved during the pandemic. People are out there spending. So yes, there's inflation and it's a little bit scary, but this is the first time we've seen where inflation isn't really hurting as much. We don't know how things are going to go. And I don't know if you agree with me on that, Beau, but it's not, I certainly don't see the kind of pain that we saw in 2008, 2009, 2010. That was an anomaly. I do think that we're going to have some corrections. You're already seeing the market slowing down, but I think it's going to be a correction. I don't think it's going to be a crash. I think it's interesting that people are so freaked out about interest rates. When I got started in real estate, I paid 7 or 8% on my first loan for my primary residence, right? And PMI and all of these things, but I got started. We're nothing at those rates right now. And how many people have heard about get private money, get hard money, That's all at 8 to 10% anyways, right? So I think that this whole thing about this fear about interest rates, just understand the market is slightly correcting. It has to do that. And we're going to pull out of this. We may not even have a huge amount to pull out of. I think, like I said, it's going to slow down. There might be a correction, but I don't think that we're going to have the doom and gloom that everybody's saying on the news and social media and a lot of people's opinions.
You're listening to the Investor Financing Podcast. We'll be right back after this break.
Hi, this is Beau, host of the Investor Financing Podcast. I appreciate you checking out our channel. On this podcast, we talk about real estate, investing, financing, business lending, and acquiring and expanding your business. I'm sure you will find some videos here that will help you build your business empire. There's a lot to see. Take your time and make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks again.
I think what we'll see the most of is not a crash in prices, but a crash in transactions, meaning people that have 2.75 30-year fixed money aren't going to move up and buy the next house quite yet. They're going to want to see the prices come down a little bit and more opportunities, maybe November, December, early part of next year. So I think that's going to happen. So I think we're already seeing like a 30-40% drop in transactions happening, which will have a little bit, obviously it'll have a trickle down effect. All these mortgage brokers, all these real estate agents, all these contractors that have been raking in millions of dollars over the last, 7-8 years bull run, they'll get hurt a little bit because they're going to go from, my residential mortgage broker friends, normally I had like my one friend, he doesn't do any marketing. He routinely makes 150, 180,000 a year. Mm-hmm. During the last 2 years, he was making like 350 a year, right? His income like doubled. Mm-hmm. And I think those people will go back to like a normal, he'll go back to making 120 or 150 grand a year. Which isn't the worst case scenario for
for a lot of people that are listening, right?
Yeah. So I do think, some people that are over leveraged, right? The ones that are going out and buying like the most expensive stuff, just like in any age, like people that spend too much money on stuff that's going to depreciate. I mean, why, if you're in a position where you can't afford that $100,000 car, why get that $100,000 car? Right. Why not just keep the car you have? Like, I keep on going back and forth about buying a new car because I have like a Toyota Camry, but I've never been a car buff. And I'm like, well, why? I don't have any. I have 2 cars. I have no loans on these cars. And like my Toyota Camry has 100,000 miles on it, but it's in good shape. And could I go out and buy a nice BMW? Of course I could easily. But I'm like, I'm married now. I got nobody to impress except my wife, right? When I was a bachelor, maybe it was more important. But things like that, where I'm saving, $800 a month on a payment, where I could go out and buy one more property because of that. Yeah. So just makes.
And I think of a lot of that consumer spending, like the really nice car, the really nice jewelry for us women, or whatever, the really cool house that you can't really afford. A lot of that stuff for me, I do those things now. I feel like it should be a no-brainer. Like it shouldn't hurt your wallet to think about it. Right? If it's hurting your wallet, you're not in a position yet that should be the focus for you. It doesn't mean you won't get there, but really pay attention, because buying assets is going to drive your life forward. Having some of these things, of course, we want joy in our life. Of course, we want things that make us feel good, but understand that you're trading short-term gain for long-term gain, right? And long-term gain is your life. That short term is just for now. So what can you do now? And I have a book called Choose Bliss. There's a lot of strategies that don't involve spending money that will make you feel really, really good, right? You don't have to be the person with the cool, for us women, the cool purse, the cool shoes, the cool clothes, the cool car, whatever it is that you're focusing on. So really focus on your future, what you can build, rather than what's going to make you look good, right?
Yeah. No, I love that, because I always think, okay, well, I could get the car, or I could go, buy a house up in the mountains that I use as an Airbnb, but then I could go whenever I want.
Yeah, I would rather spend the money. That feels good.
Yeah, I like to spend money on, like, real estate. To me is fun. Like I'd rather own real estate, and just because I know the benefits of, like, I was about 5 years ago, I went to Indiana and I started buying all these houses, and it's like I bought one house for 10 grand. $10,000. Wow. And then to that day, I get $700 a month in rent. And it's like, I mean, that was kind of a no-brainer. I mean, that house is only worth probably $60,000, $55,000 now, but $10,000 investment, I put in $5,000 to fix it up. And nice. I look at it like 10 years from now, that the house is going to be paying me $1,200 or $1,500 a month. It's be worth 120 grand. And like I barely have any money into it. Like, for me, that's fun. I've done luxury flips. I've flipped $2 million properties in San Francisco. I don't really like that, because that's not blissful for me, because that's more stressful. So
it's more stress. Beau,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, if you think about this, like, okay, so you don't have the coolest car, you go to a party, right? And everybody else has the nice purse and the nice shoes, is wearing big jewelry, right? And you're like, oh yeah, I own 10 properties in Indiana, but so what do you do? Like, seriously, I'm just going to say that I own 10 houses in Indiana is much more impressive than the monster ring you just bought, right? Like, you think you're impressing people with what you look like, but when the words come out of your mouth, people are like, what? Like, I want to be that person, right? So just if that's even something that is in your mind, and for women it is, which is why I'm talking about this, is what's in your, impressing people. You know what I mean?
I think if I was single, that stuff makes more of a difference. Like, when I was single, I remember I bought a used Mercedes. I never paid buy something new. I bought this really cool used Mercedes SL 55 with the convertible.
Yes.
My friend sold it to me, and I love that car, but it was like, God, I just don't even like spending the money on the maintenance for those Mercedes. Like, and I'm like, so I sold it. And then I'm like, now sometimes I'm like, I'm driving a Toyota. I go to like this really nice health club and everybody's got all these new cars. And I'm like, then I think about it. I'm like, nah, I don't really care about my car. I think that's blissfulness right there, that you're content. And like you know, and you hear the stories about these multimillionaires driving beat up pickup trucks, right? Like the people with real wealth don't actually need it. Now, if I was really into the cars, I would get a nice car. If I want something, I would go get it, but I don't obviously want it that much. And I think it really comes down to being blissfulness. Where can people find you? What's the best website, or where would you like people to kind of learn more about you?
Let's go to blissfulinvestor.com. So blissfulinvestor.com, and you can get a free report about how I built my wealth from $10,000. You can see my TEDx and you can see the podcast there, and also my books.
That's awesome. TEDx would be cool to do. That's one thing I'm like, I got to learn how to become a better public speaker.
That was a life-changing event for me, I have to say. Yeah.
I interviewed a guy named John Bates, and he actually gets people ready for TEDx talks. That's what and it was pretty cool. And then I went to it before I was going to interview him. I went to his website, and there's like, you know, in the old Rocky movies, there's the guy he fights, Dolph Lundgren, is the big blonde hair guy. Mm-hmm. He actually got Dolph Lundgren ready for a TEDx talk, and then Dolph had a really nice testimonial on John's website. And I was like, man, as soon as I got him on the podcast, I'm like, this is amazing. But John Bates would be a great guest. You should look for him because he talks about a lot of like neurobiology and how like when you connect with somebody, you like instantly, you know, if you trust them or if you like them. Mm-hmm. It's so true. And there's a part of your brain, I forgot what it says, but I call it your ancient brain. He has the technical definition, but it's like, you know, for example, when we got on, we had that connection where we're like, okay, this person's great. And like, sometimes you get on a podcast and you're like, oh, this person's stuffy, or I just don't, you know, connect with this person. So it's interesting. It is interesting to learn all of this stuff as you get older. I didn't go to college, and but now I study a lot of different stuff, mostly in personal development and wealth building and all that stuff. So I'm really fascinated with all this stuff as you get older. And I think that's also part of finding your blissfulness, right? Is like to find out what you really like to do and to carve out a life. I think our lives are like a blank canvas, right? We're artists, and this canvas is our life. And you can paint and create this amazing portrait or picture, but you have to choose to do it and learn how to, and like that is your reflection of your life. And like you can go out and do whatever you want. And like even with my coach, I'm like, God, I'm stressed out. And then I go, I don't even know why I'm stressed. I'm just stressed. Like there's like every Monday I feel like I have to do all this stuff, and I go, you know what, if I really just focus, it's an hour of work. It's like, but to me, I'm internalizing and making it into this big thing.
Totally stressful. Yeah. And Beau, I love your analogy about the blank canvas. You know, I'll sometimes say it's an open book, right? It's a blank book. Understand also that you're not married to that canvas. Let's say you start doing a painting and you're like, this is stressing me out, I don't like it. You get a new canvas and you start painting again. Your life is a series of opportunities, and you can create those. It can be a series of canvases that you've evolved through, a series of different chapters in this blank book, right? You have so much opportunity. If your focus is to be blissful, you'll be able to create those paintings or the chapters that you're going to enjoy continuing to create, right?
Yeah. Last question, and I'll let you go. All right. Because this has been a fun conversation. I always get energized when I have the right guests on, because podcasting is great because I share great information with others. Yeah. But from a selfish perspective, I'm like, you know what? I get a lot out of podcasting because I get people I wouldn't meet on the streets maybe. And now I'm like becoming friends with people that I didn't know, right? And then like you learn, like I just learned a lot. And I feel like I feel this sense of blissfulness right now because I've been saying it, we've been talking about it, and now I'm manifesting it.
Yay!
But okay, my last question is what do you do for personal development? Do you meditate? What does a day look like for you in a perfect world?
Yeah. So I get up, the very first thing I do is meditate. So actually, I wake up in the mornings, my alarm goes off. I push the snooze button. How many people have heard, don't push the snooze button? I push the snooze button and I spend that 10 minutes doing gratitudes. I have this gratitude practice where I just feel into the sheets and the comfiness of my bed and the day that I'm about to have and the snoring of my husband, like all of those things, where I'm super grateful for all of that stuff. Then I get out of bed, we go for a walk with the dog, have some coffee. My husband goes to work, does his first meeting. I jump in the shower then. And then we feed the dog. And so that's kind of how the morning starts. And after my shower, I'll usually do another meditation, which takes about 20 minutes. So I start with gratitude. I'll end with some sort of meditation that I lead into my day. When I go into my day, I don't start with email. I usually will start with some sort of funny video. I have a video that's called I Am Bliss. I'll watch that. So I do some very, very affirmative, joyful things so that as I get started in my day, no matter what hits me in my email, right? Remember that email is always someone else's agenda, not yours. So whoever's agenda ends up hitting me, they're coming at me and I'm in a space of bliss already. So that's and I am totally into personal development. I go to all sorts of seminars and cruises, and I'm reading constantly. I think it is the single biggest factor of my bliss is to constantly be reinforcing to myself who I am, who I want to be, and to become a better version of myself.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I like to ask questions to guests sometimes. And it's like, and you see a commonality for people that are successful in many ways, not just financial. It's that they do understand the importance of this personal development space, like whether it's people that are journaling or meditating. Mm-hmm. Most of the really successful full circle success, I'm talking not just from financial or business success, are doing these type of activities. So, it's everybody says success leaves clues, and this is true. It does mm-hmm. leave clues. Like, you have to get in this state. And I love the fact that you're getting in a state of blissfulness before you start your day, because I'm always dealing with people's agendas first, not my agenda. It's their agenda. Mm-hmm. And you just nailed that. So that was a huge nugget. So anyways, guys, I love this episode. You're going to see this, either going to listen to it on audio or you're going to see it on YouTube. It's a great interview. Because it's not all about that grind life that everybody's preaching. It's really about blissfulness, guys. That's the big takeaway here, guys. And listen to this episode, absorb it, and start living your life in a blissful manner. And I think it's going to truly help everybody out there to put a smile on their face, to wake up, not to rush into your other people's agendas, and to really, start your day where you're already in that peak state of flow, and then anything that comes your way, you're just smiling about. So thank you so much. Appreciate this episode. I'm going to link down your information so people can find you and follow you, because I think you're a wealth of information and just a joyous person. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Beau. This is a true pleasure.